today is how the university can prepare for an event, how you as faculty or staff can prepare for an event, as well as your individual departments. A little bit about my background. I'm the director of campus security here. I've been here for about 3 years. I'm also a deputy sheriff with the Bradley County Sheriff's Office. Have about 10 years of law enforcement. I graduated from the state level SWAT school for basic and advanced. I served 4 years on the SWAT team at the Cleveland Police Department, and I'm currently serving as a SWAT officer with Bradley County Sheriff's Office, which I've been doing for about 2 years. So I train monthly on this topic. So I'm pretty up to date as far as what the tactical intervention is, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So the big question that you want to ask yourself is, are you prepared? Are you prepared as an individual? Is the university prepared as an institution? Is your department prepared for what might occur? 5 deadliest shootings in the U.S. have occurred in roughly the past 10 years. Las Vegas attack, most recent, was the deadliest shooting in modern U.S. history, where at least 58 were killed. And it's only 10 years removed from the Virginia Tech massacre in 2007, where 32 were killed. And a year removed from the second deadliest shooting, which was the Orlando nightclub shooting, where 49 were killed. Last November, y'all all remember the shooting at the church in Texas, which was the 5th deadliest shooting, where 26 were killed. So that means the 30 deadliest shootings in the United States, which date all the way back to 1949, 18 of those have occurred in the last 10 years, which is roughly 60%. Here's a little graph. People have a greater chance of dying in a mass shooting if they're at school or place of business. According to FBI data, incidents in schools and businesses represent 7 out of 10 active shootings. Some of the country's most high-profile mass shootings, including Sandy Hook, Columbine, Virginia Tech. And there's a little graph there that shows between schools and businesses, 70%, all the way down to healthcare facilities, which is the smallest amount. Course objectives for this: what actions to take when confronted with an active shooter and responding law enforcement officials, what actions to take to prevent and prepare for potential active shooter incidents, and we will also go over page 6 on the quick reference guide for active shooter, which will be a very brief synopsis of what I'll talk about here. FBI defines an active shooter as an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, the active shooter uses a firearm, and there's no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Situations are unpredictable and they evolve very quickly. Typically, the immediate deployment of law enforcement is what is required to stop the shooting and mitigate harm to victims. Because active shooter situations are over within 5 to 10 minutes before law enforcement usually arrive on scene, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. And I can tell you that Cleveland Police Department's response time is 5 to 10 minutes. A little image here. I think it kind of paints a funny picture, but the sign there is kind of what it's all about. Welcome to It Could Never Happen Here, USA. And you can put whatever place you want to in there. Welcome to It Could Never Happen Here, North Cleveland, or First Baptist, or Lee University. And that's the mindset you have to be careful about, is it could never happen here. My brother, he works for the Department of Defense, and he does a lot of investigations and stuff for them. And he said the biggest way to scare the majority of the populace in America with terrorism is not another New York incident or Las Vegas. It's hitting a small rural town that nobody's heard of and causing mass casualty there. Because if you hit a small town nobody's heard of, then everybody thinks, well, it could happen here. You know, it's easy to be removed from New York. It's easy to be removed from Atlanta or Las Vegas, but you hit, Polk County High School, and then all of a sudden it kind of, wow, if it could happen there, it could happen anywhere. April 20th, 1999, everybody remembers Columbine, Littleton, Colorado. Suspects, Eric Harris and Dylan Cleveland, were students there. They've been picked on, they've been bullied, and they decided they've had enough. One morning they went in, started shooting up the place. They killed 13, including 12 students and 1 teacher, wounded 21 additional people, and both committed suicide. It's the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history. What a lot of people don't know is they found over 99 explosive devices, pipe bombs. They used propane tanks, like for your grill. They took those up to explode. A lot of them didn't go off, but it took quite a while after the incident for the bomb techs to go in and defuse everything. They rigged bombs in cars, things like that. The incident started at 11:19 a.m. The shooting started. Police response was at 11:22. That's pretty good. Matter of fact, they had an SRO, armed police officer, on site when it started. He actually engaged the suspects in gunfire, but because it was over 60 yards away, his handgun was inefficient, and they exchanged gunfire. Nobody hit either, and the suspects fled back into the building where they started shooting. The suspects committed suicide at 12:08, and their bodies were not found until 3:30. And the reason why I talk about Columbine is because at the high school it's a little different. It's all enclosed in one building. They had an armed police officer there, but this is what changed the way law enforcement handles active shooters. This single incident right here revolutionized it. Because back then the plan was, if you have an armed individual, mass shooting something, police would respond in, surround the buildings, they would call the SWAT team in, SWAT would systematically go through and clear it. And that's exactly what they did. And it cost that teacher his life because he was shot, I want to say 10 after 1. And they hung a sign out the window that basically said, "I'm bleeding to death." And they did not. When they found him, and I think it was 3:15, he had died because he had bled to death. And so, as a result, it came down federally, the Secret Service, the FBI, they all looked into this. And so they changed the tactics. And we'll talk about that a little bit and how that applies to us as members of the university here. So lessons learned from active shootings, not just Columbine, but these are lessons that I've learned from all of them put together. The active shooter incidents are spontaneous. Suspects' behavior is unpredictable, and they are typically a target-rich environment: a school, a church, a shopping mall, a place where a lot of people are in close proximity to each other. A tactical intervention was too late. We talked about that. By the time they called in the SWAT team, which has a response time of 20 to 30 minutes. I mean, that's well past the 5 or 10 on average until the incident is over. Officers on scene neutralized the threat. Those are your initial officers that arrived on scene. And there were also multi-jurisdictional response issues. We won't talk about those today, but what you're having problems with is every agency, in 10 miles is coming in, and so there was no communication between them, like there would be with the city police department, the sheriff, the state, all that kind of stuff. So they worked on that as well. So what to expect during an active shooter incident? This picture down here is at Virginia Tech, and it shows them carrying out, I don't know if I can see that very well, but it actually shows them carrying out students who have been shot. So there'll be lots of noise, confusion, screaming. There could be alarms going off, fire alarms, things like that. Victims will be running, they'll be hiding, confused, frightened. Once you get into that state of shock, people get very unpredictable, and even people who are in general sound mind tend to freeze up and not know what to do. And I used to see it all the time working car wrecks. You have a minor fender bender out here on Georgetown Road, and when you pull up, there would be some guy just pacing up and down, and he doesn't know what to do, and it's a minor car. Nobody's injured, but because he's been in that incident and it's overloaded his senses and he's not used to being in that, he just he freezes. And so that will be a very common thing that you will see. There could be carnage. If there's any type of improvised explosive device, of course, if there's firearms or knives, there's going to be carnage, blood, things like that. Fire and sprinkler operations could be going on. It depends on whether or not there were devices that exploded or not. Gunfire, things like that. Just pretty much mass chaos. Worst case scenario is what you can expect. How will you be notified? You'll be notified through Lead You Alerts. Is everybody signed up for Lead You Alerts here? Okay. That is the way that we will notify if there is an incident. There will be a blast that goes out. It can basically go to everybody on campus within 2 seconds. I mean, it is that quick. It's a special program that they have. And it will give the location and what the incident is. So it could be active shooter incident in humanities. Okay. And so that's basically going to say that you need to stay away from humanities, or if you're in humanities, you need to try and get out. And we'll talk about that in a second. What Lead Alerts also does is it sends an email blast out. So if you're not linked up to Lead Alerts and you get your emails to your phone, it'll come that way. And then we'll also use use of mass communications through like the on-screen billboards and things like that in the different buildings. So what FEMA basically recommends right now is the run, hide, fight method. I think it's pretty good method. It's very basic. Most every school, place of business has adopted this, and that's what we've adopted. And the run, hide, fight basically says run towards the safest exit. If you can't run, then hide. Lock and secure the door with chairs and tables. And if you can't, the last ditch effort is to fight. So evacuate or run. So if there is an active shooter in your building and there's an accessible escape path, you want to attempt to evacuate the premises if at all possible. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. Leave your belongings behind. Help others escape if possible. Make sure when exiting, you keep your hands visible, and that's for law enforcement coming in because they don't know who the suspect is, and they will more than likely treat everybody coming out as a potential shooter. So keep that in mind. They recommend not to attempt to move wounded people. That's a judgment call that you have to make. Obviously, you want to get out with your life. Are you willing to risk your life to get somebody out? Some are, some aren't. So that's a judgment call that you have to make. And then, of course, follow the instructions of police officers. And again, we definitely emphasize whether others agree to follow or not. If you hear shots or somebody says, hey, there's a shooter in the building, it's time to go if you can get out. And if everybody's like, well, we don't know it, see y'all, and because you want to try and get as far away from it as possible. If you cannot get out, if there's no way to egress or evacuate, then you want to find a place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you, out of his view or her view. Should provide some protection if shots are fired in your direction. That's not always the case because, who knows what'll block a shot. Different materials, it reacts differently, depends on ammunition, caliber, all that kind of stuff. If you can, lock the door to the classroom, to the office pod, things like that. Blockade the door with heavy furniture. Definitely silence your cell phone and any noise sources and try and remain quiet. One thing I forgot to cover on the evacuating, they recommend if you can to take your cell phone with you. Most people have their cell phone on them when it's on the desk, and the reason for that is when you get out, you can notify people that you were out. Because what's going to happen is if we were to have an incident in Humanities at 2 o'clock on a Friday, once that situation is done, we have to go back and we have to figure out every class that takes place at 2 o'clock on Friday, get the roster for every class, and we have to physically make contact with each person on that to see, were you in class today, were you not? Because we got to get a count of who's there and who's not, who's missing, things like that. So if you can't, yes, sir.
Blockade the door with heavy furniture.
Yes.
If you're hiding, the idea is that he doesn't know you're there.
Mm-hmm.
If all of our doors are glass doors and we blockade the door, we just said we're in here.
Mm-hmm.
So do we blockade the door?
If the door will not lock, I would blockade it.
Okay, if it's
what I
locked,
would
then
do.
don't block it.
Now, yeah, if the door will lock it, turn the lights out, and hide somewhere over here where if he peers in, he's not going to see. Because what they found out is by blockading the door, even just locking it, most of the time, and I forget the statistic, and I don't want to stop, but a very high percentage of the time, they move on. They don't try and gain access to a locked area or to a blockaded area because time is against them. If they know law enforcement's coming, they're trying to kill as many people as they can until they are engaged or until they kill themselves, which are the two most common from there. And so that's what you want to do. We want to maximize that 5 to 10 minutes right there, the typical law enforcement response time. The longer we can hold that out, the better chance of survival everybody has. And last ditch effort, when your life is in imminent danger, attempt to disrupt or incapacitate the active shooter by acting as aggressively as possible against him or her, throwing items and improvising weapons, yelling, basically committing to your actions. You blockaded in your office pod, you put a desk in there, they open it up and here they come in and there's no way out. my God, we're gonna go down with a fight. You know, you may shoot me 10 times, but you know, you're gonna have your hands full, basically. Use anything you can. Pick up a chair. You can take a pen and hold that and shove right through their eyeball. That right there, that'll take care of business. So, I mean, anything that you can find like that, please available. That's the same response I get from everybody. Somebody trying to shoot you. Okay, how to react when law enforcement arrive. Officers may be in regular uniforms, they may have external vests, ballistic helmets, tactical equipment, they may be in blue jeans with something that says police or sheriff or something. They will be armed with rifles, not may, shotguns, handguns. They may use pepper spray or CS gas. More likely that's not going to take place unless it's a barricaded situation. They're going to shout commands, they're going to push individuals to the ground, things like that, because again, as law enforcement come in, they have no idea who is a innocent victim and who the active shooter is. You know, you hope that whoever called 911 saw the person, can give a description. Hey, it's a white male, 6'5", you know, wearing a blue suit. You would hope that would be the case because then that eliminates a lot of people. But if they say, hey, all I hear are gunshots, or I think it's, you know, a white guy or something like that, then, you know, they're going to have to treat everybody like a suspect at that point. And this picture down here, that's Columbine. You see all the students coming out because the report was that, you know, 2 students were shooting. They don't know if, you know, any of those people are the potential suspects or not. So they're going to, as they bring people out, they're going to put them in a location, they're going to search them, they may put them in handcuffs, basically until they can determine that they are no longer a threat. So don't take it personal. And just, we say that to just be aware of it because a lot of people, as they're coming out, if they get thrown to the ground, well, hey, I'm not the, you know, that's not going to work out too well because they're trying to assess the situation and figure it out and go in and handle the tactics. Remain calm, follow the officer's instructions. Try not to carry anything. Again, they recommend now to keep your cell phone, if at all possible, put it in your pocket or something like that. Keep your hands raised with fingers spread. Avoid making quick movements towards the officers. Avoid pointing, screaming, or yelling. It's already going to be a chaotic situation. They know more than likely what the building the threat is in, so you hollering or screaming and pointing at the building is not going to really be helping anything. And do not stop to ask officers for help or directions when like that. So the way that law enforcement tactics are now is they train individual police officers to go in and handle a threat, what's called a direct to threat action. And when the initial 1 or 2 officers show up, which is patrol officers, they will then gather what equipment they need and they will go in and they will make contact with the shooter and they will neutralize the threat. Okay? They're going to pass up anybody who shot. They're going to pass up anybody who's injured, and they're not going to stop to help. Okay? Don't be that teacher that bled to death. You know, different departments that I give this presentation to, they say, well, hey, you know, we heard your presentation. We've got a small medical kit now that we have, and we put a tourniquet or something like that. That's awesome because that may be what you need to save your life. You don't need all this equipment or anything. If you have just a small bag with certain medical equipment to prevent mass hemorrhaging, which is usually the #1 cause of death, with gunshots and stuff like that, you're going to be a leg up. Because what if it takes a long time for them to get to you? Okay? And people don't understand that, hey, law enforcement's going to pass you by when you come in. Until that threat is neutralized and they can confirm it, they're going to go handle that. Then they're going to go back and slow and deliberate search and check every closet and every counter and every nook and cranny that somebody could hide in. So just be aware of that. If y'all, as individuals, want to have something at your desk, or as a department you want to pull together or something like that and get some small items, I think that's a good idea. All my guys have them in the cars just in case, but you know, they're more than likely not going to be too close if there's a shooter happening. They're going to be keeping people from coming into the building. They're not going to be going in the building themselves. This is what a standard government ID looks like for law enforcement. CPD's is a little bit different. And I added this because the past couple times that I've given this presentation, everybody asks, well, say we're barricaded inside the room and they're yelling, hey, we're the police. Do we come out, and how do we know if it's the police or not? Well, the easiest way is police are trained to slide you their ID card under the door. And so that lets you know whether that person is a law enforcement officer or not. Anybody can have a badge or something like that, but nobody can get a government ID like this. I mean, you can make one, I guess, but nobody knows really what they look like. So if somebody slides something like this under the door, you know it's legit. It'll have a picture, it'll have a badge, it'll have status, and then in the right up here, it'll say is a sworn deputy sheriff or a sworn police officer for the city of Cleveland, something like that. And that lets you know that, hey, this person is legit on the other side of this door. Okay, so this is page 6 of your quick reference guide. Basically, all the information that I just went over, run, hide, fight, we condensed down. And the purpose of that is you want to go over this, you want to read this periodically so that you have a general idea of what to do. But in the midst of it, the only things you need to worry about is run, hide, fight. And that's really easy for people to do. Run, if possible, evacuate the building and keep hands visible. Hide, if evacuation is not possible, seek shelter or safety, and fight. And attempt to use anything for a weapon, books, pens, etc. Up at the top, we talk about the paramount thing that we are most concerned about at the university is the health and safety of students, faculty, and staff. That is why I'm employed here, is the safety of students, faculty, and staff. My job is to keep everybody here safe, basically. And I will do everything I can to make that happen. Again, below are the guidelines. Underneath, this kind of gives you an idea, and this is more likely what you would read at your desk periodically to kind of get an idea of it. All employees have shelter in place or evacuate, whichever provides the most protection. Obviously, if you can get out of the building, definitely get out of the building, but if you cannot, then shelter. All employees should take direction from the officer law enforcement officer. Maintain contact with 911 if it can safely be done without giving away your position. Okay. Once 911 says officers are on the way, they're more likely to keep you on the line unless all the 911 lines are full. And I want to say there's 7 stations at 911, I think. So you're not going to get more than about 7 people on the phone at once. So anyway, and so they may say, hey, thank you, you're good to go and hang up. But if you see the suspect or they're keeping you on for any reason, you definitely want to relay that information as long as you can do it without giving away your position. If you hear, somebody coming down the hallway, you don't want to be sitting out here, I think he's coming down the hallway now, or whatever. If you need to hang up, you can always call back. They know they're coming. Evacuation is not possible. Again, lock yourself inside an office, turn out the lights, mute your cell phone. You want to make it to where when they peer in through the window or the glass door, they cannot see. You don't want to hide over here. You want to hide over here. Again, barricade, like we talked about, if the office door can't be shut or the classroom door cannot be locked. I'm sorry. If you can, provide detailed description of the shooter. That's self-explanatory, and especially the whereabouts, if you can. That's going to be very key as well. Where are they inside the building? Because if I'm going into humanities, and I'm trying to find this guy, if you say, hey, he's on the 3rd floor in such and such room, well, I can bypass a whole lot of the building to get to him pretty quickly than it would be if I got to go in there and try to listen for shots and go through it, which is what they teach now. And then underneath is the emergency response agency's duties and actions. It is a crime scene, so you will not be allowed back into the building to get your purse, to get your keys, anything like that until law enforcement clears that scene, and it's going to take a very long time for an active shooter. I can tell you that because the FBI is going to investigate it. So, and they take a very long time. So anyway, does anybody have any questions with page 6? We tried to keep it really short. We tried to keep it to the point to where you don't have to spend a lot of time reading, a lot of time figuring out what to do. Run, hide, fight. Pretty simple. Yes.
I understand that you're building one alone. Of course, that would be that if you knew they weren't on your floor, if you're unsure and I'm responsible for all our students as well, trying to find out where they are and stick my head out in the hallway, that there's that to do it. But what if that happens in one place, it happens in another with all of our students in class? We don't want to disperse them, right? At that point, we want to keep them where we are.
Correct. Yes, we would do a lockdown procedure, which I'll talk about right after this because it has to do with the quick reference and like the building supervisors and things like that. So your building supervisor will be notified to lock down your building, nobody in or out. No matter if it's your boss standing out there, hey, open up the door. Sorry, you can fire me, but we can't let you in. And we'll talk about that here in a second, but that's what you would do. If it's at the other end of campus, you definitely don't want to be dispersing hundreds of students out because we know it's in this building, but like Virginia Tech, it swapped buildings really quickly, and that created a problem. So, somebody else have a question?
My question was what you're getting ready to talk about.
Okay, all right. This right here talks about the way that they usually end. Most shooters take their own lives, about 40%. 70% of active shooters, 70% of active shooter incidents end with the shooter or shooters' deaths, according to the FBI. Unlike a homicide or mass killing, the active aspect implies that both law enforcement and citizens have the potential to affect the outcome of the event. And they don't necessarily mean affecting the outcome as engaging, but what we can do to prepare to extend those 5 to 10 minutes, that outcome. So down here, well, 40% of shooters ultimately commit suicide. 28% exchange gunfire with law enforcement, and then it goes down from there. Unarmed citizens successfully restrain the shooter. 3% armed citizens exchange gunfire with the shooter. Any questions as to this topic before we talk about the lockdown procedures? Yes, sir.
Everybody, most people know me. I've been a concealed carry advocate for a long time.
Okay.
And in a target-rich environment, I mean, if you're not armed, that's the reason it's target-rich. Are you a concealed carry advocate?
Am I concealed carry? Yeah, not on campus, but everywhere else, yeah.
Does our campus have a no gun policy?
Inside the buildings, yes. So state law allows it inside your vehicle as long as you're a non-student adult over 21, but it can't be inside.
Do we have signs up for that thing?
We do not.
No, that's what I advise.
I don't see the sense of having that policy if we don't have signs that advise people they're up.
Right. Yeah, that's you, and
But
who handles the signage?
I suppose it
for
might,
the-
tip off a potential shooter to the fact that, oh, well, nobody's gonna have any guns in here. But I mean, is that the rationale?
I don't know if all schools would do that.
Okay.
I don't know businesses that you can see signs. In fact, I can't think of the sign I saw that would use seen there, which I'd like to see. That's not good.
I know in Texas, a lot of businesses would have the signs clearly on the outside of the entrances to the building.
I think that if you have a policy that does not allow it, you're supposed to, but I think basically up until recently, the law says you couldn't in the university anyway. When they changed the law, I think it was last year or the year before, it says you could under these specific guidelines, but private universities were not included in that. So the board and the president make the decision as to the rules for firearm regulations on campuses in the state of Tennessee now.
It seems like most of the people I know that do carry take it upon themselves to know what the rules are wherever they go. And so there's a little bit of responsibility to know that to figure out. I'm not saying that's nobody's concern, but
And it is in our policy manuals for students and for employees as well. So that is on our responsibility to know what our own policies are as an employee, what I can and cannot follow. But advertising it with a big sign at the front is kind of like putting a target on your head, especially with that type of situation, because you already have a lot of people in one area that's already a target-rich environment, and then now I'm going to advertise that you don't have a weapon, so that creates a contradictory situation that you would want to put our students at risk for. But the state law does not allow students, period.
The signs that restaurants used to put in the windows is exactly the reason that legislation was passed to allow concealed carry. Because for people, it wasn't the idea that you would have to get drunk and get in a gunfight in a bar. It was that you would be unsafe going from the restaurant to the parking area. The very night that passed in Tennessee, 2 people were carjacked outside of the restaurant. And then most restaurants stopped putting those signs and those, because that was just invited. You know, thugs.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
How many security cameras do we have, and are they monitored 24/7?
We have 17, which are on the outside, starting at a music building, and they cover the parking lots all the way up to 15th Street, and then all the way over to North Cleveland. So we have proposals in to add cameras throughout campus. It's kind of on a phase project. So that was phase 1. Phase 2 is another section. Phase 3 is the south end of campus. They're very expensive. So we can't put them in everywhere at once, but yeah, eventually we will have them everywhere. Once we do all the outside, then we'll start going into the interiors and hitting hallways and things like that. But those are, I don't have a guy sitting there 24/7, but they record 24/7 for about 30 to 31 days. And we can go back and look at them. Now during the day, a lot of times I got somebody sitting there looking at them. So, and they're full color, day, night cameras. They're very nice. Any other questions? All right. Does anybody have any questions as pertains to the emergency quick reference guide or lockdown procedures or anything like that?
Do the students get any kind of instruction in this? Because if they don't know that they're supposed to have their hands up as they go out, I would like to see anything bad happen.
Yeah, Mike, aren't they doing something now in the gateway class or something like that where they're giving them information?
They can cover it in gateway, it's optional, that in all but it is covered in 2020.
That's okay. Yeah. Okay, well, that's all I've got. I'll be here to answer questions if anybody has anything else or they want to answer.
I had one, you're in lockdown,
Yes.
and the idea is that the shooter is maybe somewhere else, so we're taking off on the idea that you had. So you're in lockdown, and then the situation changes from you're in lockdown because the shooter's in some other building, and now the shooter's in your building. At that point, do you consider getting out of the building if you can do so safely?
That's gonna be a judgment call on the buildings and what's going on inside there. Because at that point, if you're already locked down, I would not recommend trying to go through the building and tell everybody if all of a sudden you hear shots. Everybody's locked down at this point. So at that point, then you would just immediately go to the hide method. As opposed now, if you see this guy coming across the lawn or whatever, and he's shooting at people as he's walking, then you have the decision to make, hey, do we try and go out the back? You know, what do we do at that point? But, I mean, some of this, there's really no clear cut, hey, this is exactly what you do. It's just kind of, what does the situation dictate? And what do I feel is the best move to make it that? And again, you may recommend to evacuate, and other people may say, I'm staying. So,
If they're in the room with you, that's it. I mean, if they get in the room, and you pull a gun in the room. Just not in your room.
yeah, chair, anything that you can, I mean, whatever
Read in the history of the kings of Britain.
What's that? It is. Yes.
When there was the shooting in Chattanooga, that's actually in the Science and Math Center, or Publix.
Okay, you're talking about the one this summer, a year or two ago? Okay.
Yeah. And we had students who said, look, I'm over 18, I wanna get out, even though we were in a lockdown situation. So we highly encouraged them not to, but they left anyway. At that point, is that their decision?
That's their decision. You can only do some, I mean, technically, I mean, aside from physically restraining somebody, I mean, but who's really gonna wanna do that? But if they're saying, hey, I'm leaving, I'm out, okay. You know, I mean, you wanna do everything you can to keep them in that lockdown procedure, but there's gonna come a point where you physically cannot keep them from doing that. Now, if the door's locked, you don't have to unlock it for them, you know. But if they're like, I'm gonna go out, you know, most of the doors, exteriors are push doors anyway, you know, then that's on them. And so if something happens to them, you've done what you could do to keep them, because you're following university policy.
Is there a particular personality for individuals that we need to look into with regards to preventing possible attack?
You know, I actually looked into that, excuse me, and there's been some studies done, but from what I can understand, there's really no specific. Some of them you look at on TV, and you know, like the Aurora shooting in the theater. That dude looked crazy. Oh my gosh, he had orange hair, and all, I mean, he just looked blacked out of his mind. You know, you may look at that guy as a shooter, you know, but some of these other people, you know, there's really no clear take, and you don't know what it is, because is this a domestic situation that's gone bad? Is this, you know, the wife works here and the husband just decided, you know what, we're going through a divorce, I'm not going to deal with this anymore, and comes in and everybody knows him and he's a great guy, but this day he's had enough. It could be that kind of situation. It could be a student. It could be a community member. It could be somebody coming off the street saying, hey, I got nothing left to live for, I'm going to run out with a bang, you know, literally. So.
Are our doors automatically locked?
Look, there are only a few buildings on campus that can be completely remote locked, where every exterior door can be locked from our office. We would do that. I can go in there, right click, and I can say lock down, and any door with swipe access will automatically lock down. The problem is, a lot of buildings, the door right beside it will still push open with the way that the mechanism is designed. So that is why, through the quick reference guide, I think it's in the back, there's going to be built. Thank you very much. This right here, this building supervisor, I don't know what the technical name is for it. These are all the buildings and the responsible person who will be in charge of making sure that building is locked down. So again, this is fresh. We're going to be meeting with these people, going over what their duties are. But for admissions house, if we go into lockdown, there's no swipe access on it. There's no best system that we can remote lock. It's going to be Ms. Smith's job to make sure that those doors are locked. Okay, so that's kind of, what's that? They will at their first meeting.
They agree.
They agree. Because my guys can physically not lock every building down. I think we tried it one day with them literally running and hitting exterior doors. It took over an hour. Every building. That was like 4 guys, which I never had 4 guys working at one time. So it takes a long time. So that's why if we can remote lock and then each person in that building just go hit the exterior doors, you can be done in 5 minutes. And 5 to 10 is response time. So.
And along with that, on those back 2 pages of your thing is the list of emergency contacts for that building. Like you said, we will be letting them know all the information they need to know as far as what to do. So, you know, if you'll give them a month or 2, they'll be able to talk to you about that. But as well, on the other side of the page is a hideout place for you in inclement weather. So, for example, in the last year, we had a tornado type situation where we had some severe weather coming in. And so you'll find that page. I use that page all the time. It has the building address on it. Who knew the address of your own building? So that way you have the address of your building. Say, for example, somebody needed an ambulance was called to your building. Now you have the address to your building. It's always a helpful thing to have. But then it also has a shelter place that you can go in inclement weather. So those are two really benefits to this little piece of paper here, is being able to find that information.
All right, if there's no more questions, I appreciate y'all being here, and y'all have a wonderful day.